During this Easter season, as I said, we've been noticing the questions in each of the Bible stories that we'll explore through these 6 or 7 weeks. Some of the stories are from after the death and resurrection, and the post-Easter stories, we call them, and some from stories of the people who carried on after Christ. There are questions that show up in each of these stories. There's more than one in this story that we just heard, and the first one is, you don't have any fish, do you? And so that's the one that I am going to focus on today. Actually, I cut the second part of the section, which would have had the other question in it. The other question was, do you love me? Suppose that could work too. The disciples had left the upper room, the place where they were hiding out after Jesus was hung on the cross, after the women went to the tomb and found it empty, after Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene in the garden. So they've made some progress in their grief, in other words. They've left the upper room. And they were all hiding out, not sure what to do next, not sure what was happening, not sure if it was safe. They probably still don't know what to do next, but what they've decided is it was safe enough to leave and try to go out and on with their lives in the wake of this loss. So they go fishing. They go back to what they know. They hope they can make some money. I want to say that because I think that, I don't know for sure, but I think that for those of us here in this place, in Minnesota, when we think of people going fishing, it's like what you do to go to relax. You go and stare at a bobber all day long. I sew, and so I often accidentally say bobbin. My dad fishes, so I'm familiar with all of the things, but those two things get me. They watch the bobber all day long. And then sit in the boat that gently rocks you and feel the sun all day long. Like, that's our image of fishing. Fishing opener is next week. So these guys, this is a different kind of a deal. This is like commercial fishing for them. Maybe it's calming, but it's work. And they go at night. And I could extrapolate from cultural context what's going on there to figure out why they go at night. But in the book of John, particularly, you could say, for instance, that they go at night. I don't know why you would fish at night, but there could be some reason for it. But in the book of John, there's probably a metaphorical reason for it as well, is what I want to point out. Because there's these things that happen in John. It's a motif that he uses to help us understand something about people. The whole gospel begins this way, right? With Jesus, by telling us that Jesus is the light of the world, but people walked in darkness more than light and loved the darkness more than the light. A couple chapters later, you've got Nicodemus who comes to Jesus at night with his questions. When Judas goes out, the text tells us, and it was night. So there are always these places where you see the night showing up. And here are the disciples who have been fishing, the text tells us, all night. And they've caught nothing. Perhaps you're familiar with the phrase, darkness, the dark night of the soul, which has come to refer to a crisis of faith or a painful or difficult period in one's life. The phrase comes from an older poet than we usually use, St. John of the Cross, who has a series of poems about our journey towards God. And the dark night of the soul is one of those parts of the journey towards God. And as the darkness of the souls or in our minds, sometimes those are the places where Christ shows up and meets us. So here are these disciples hauling in their empty nets all night long with their empty souls and their racing minds. You know these nights, right? Tired, not knowing what to do. And then there is this man on the beach asking if they've caught anything. Actually, assuming they've caught nothing. You haven't caught anything, have you? Giving them fishing instructions as if casting on the other side of the boat will do any good at all. And of course it does. And now they are not able to haul it in because there are so many fish. And then that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on some clothes, for he was naked, and jumped into the sea. Again, cultural context makes it a little harder to understand. This was actually my ordination text too, and then we used naked wine as our wine for communion. But the other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, only about 100 yards off. And when they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you have caught." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. I don't know. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." Now, none of the disciples dared to ask him, "Who are you?" because they knew it was the Lord. On Easter morning, about a decade ago, I was in one of those dark nights of the soul. I had just lost a friend, not to death, but to humanity, being what it is, which is sometimes confusing and full of all of us being human. He was a close friend, and for me, as a person who travels solo through this world, my friendships are very important to me. And so I was hurting. Lots of you probably relate to that too. And so on this Easter morning, I went out for a walk. And I went down to this lake near where I lived in California, and I was walking around to this spot that I like to sit at on this rock over the lake before the kids show up and start jumping off of it. And I sat down by this calm lake. And I'm going to tell you the story about how I met Christ that day. It was in the person of a 7-year-old girl named Eloise. She came up to me while I was sitting on this rock, and I had been thinking about the words from that poem that we heard as I touched the rock next to me. "Earth, cure me. Earth, receive my woe. Rock, strengthen me. Rock, receive my weakness." Up comes this little girl saying, "Hello." And then she said to me, "I'm going to throw this rock in the water." She was wearing a blue and white checkered skirt, one red sock and one blue one, fluorescent yellow shoes, a blue t-shirt with personal messages written all over it, and a pink and green sparkling hat over bright red hair, still drying from a jump in the lake. "Okay," I said, and she threw the rock, and then she watched it. The rock disappears, and what is left is these ever-widening circles. And then when the ripples stopped, she said, "I like to watch the ripples and see how far they go and how they disappear." I find myself smiling. The kind of smile that you can't even stop. And then Christ tells me, "The earth is really wonderful, isn't it?" "Yes, it is," I tell Eloise, as tears catch in my eye. She throws another rock, watches it. "I like to watch the light in the circles in the water." She says, "Do you want to throw one?" She hands me a rock. So I throw a rock with Christ, and we watch it sink out of sight and watch the circles widen and then disappear again, watching the lights in the ripples. I think about a rock receiving my pain. And I think about that rock disappearing down to the bottom of the lake. I think about how that pain causes ripples that touch other people's lives, other parts of life widening. But then it dissipates and the water returns to the surface that it was. Our lives aren't quite like that. We may never recover like water, but I pray, let me be like water, returning, smoothing to calm, which it did eventually. Let me return easily to a good soul state place, a sacred space. The world is really amazing, isn't it? Christ interrupts again. And I try not to show my emotion. I mean, she continues, it's so limitless. I bet there are places on earth that no one has ever been. Yeah, I bet that's true, I say. Thinking I had some of those same thoughts when I was her age, praying for her and what may come in her life. I have to go now, she says to me, but I'm going to throw one more rock. You can have the rest. She pulls rocks out of her skirt pocket. We watch her last rock go into the water, and when the ripples go away, after some time, her family, who have been standing 15 feet behind us the whole time, watching, call to her and say, okay, Eloise, it's time to move on. I fantasize for a moment that maybe they know they are the disciples, walking around with Christ, who is making resurrection appearances at the lakeside. But probably not. Resurrection seems often to be a little hidden. It was nice to meet you, Eloise, I tell Christ. And then I think in my head of all the places Christ is present, in this girl, in this rock, in this world, and in me. In the name of God, who is still creating and redeeming and sustaining, I am a child of God. Jesus said to the disciples, come and have breakfast. Now, none of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. May we, on those dark nights of the soul, know that this is where we may see Christ, who is the light of the world, who is always coming into the world, and who meets us on the beach when we're tired and empty and vulnerable in our nakedness and asks, you don't have any fish, do you? Knowing that the unease in our racing minds all night long have produced nothing good. That we are tired and naked and empty, and here is Christ standing on the beach, changing our perspective and inviting us to sit by the fire and have breakfast. Amen.